Who here has never had conflict? We all have, haven't we, in some way, shape or form. So I brought along some books that I found really useful, and one of the papers I'm using today actually comes from this book, Caring Enough to Confront, it's called. By a guy called Augsburger. Again, we'll be using his model today to look at, managing conflict and dealing with conflict. It's probably one of the best ones I've come across for a long time. I like his model because it's very flexible and adaptable, and you can plug it into each situation as you go along. So I find that particularly useful when I'm dealing with very different people and different spaces. If you're going to get into do conflict stuff, you need to look at forgiveness. I found Forgiving the Dead Men Walking a particularly little powerful book. It's a little biography on someone forgiving someone who had actually hurt someone quite severely. But it was her story of the process of forgiveness. And I'm not sure you can do conflict without forgiveness. You can't have one without the other. I don't think it's possible. If you're going to do conflict with someone or go into conflict, there's also a process of forgiveness every time. And we need to be able to work through that. I've got some stuff on forgiveness too that I would use for people. It's more about forgiving yourself, but we can adapt it and change it around. But for a lot of people I would work with, their biggest issue is forgiving themselves. And so having a process in place is good for that as well, but we can use that. But again, a good book to read helps you understand the process of forgiveness, that it's not simply snap and you forgive. I don't agree with that. There are some people who forgive easier than others, by the way. They just seem to do it, and I think, crap. For me, I've got to really work at it. If I don't forgive someone, I tend to write them off. I don't know what you're like, but I can write them off, and it's like they're not even in the room. So I have to be very careful with how I go about the process of doing conflict and stuff. But again, another one, if you're going to get into conflict, is the issue of anger. And again, we need to be able to use anger well if we're going to do conflict well. I don't think we use anger well within our Western culture. I think anger is particularly important for us as we deal with the idea of conflict, and being able to listen to it and use it as an ally and not something that chews us up and spits us out. Again, but we need to be more aware of it and how it affects us. But I found her writing particularly good on the whole subject. And the other one I've come across, which I've started reading, is by the same author from the first book. It's called Hate Work, which is interesting. I think his idea is that we all get to hate part of who we are, and how we go about the process of working through it and coming to a different space is interesting. But again, now we've got a lot of different cultures coming into our place called Australia, and they bring their conflicts with them, which causes a whole different kind of idea on hate and that kind of stuff. So I've worked with a couple of people from different cultures, and they've come from war-torn conflict type places. It's very easy for them to hate. Probably it is easier than for me, because I don't live in a war-torn country or with lots of trauma, but for these people they have to work out how to do hate and how to work through it in such a way that they're able to let go of that and move towards reconciliation. So a good process to have around. So again, you'll all get notes. Okay, so again, these are my notes. We actually ran Caring Enough to Confront as a group. We ran a 10-week session on it. Wow. And so we took the book and we just simply adapted the chapters that people wanted from that book. So you're actually getting a couple of chapters in these notes today. One was written by myself, another was written by One of the people I work with within the mental health system, so she actually helped me to do the group, so you get her notes as well. But again, just turn to the person next to you and actually discuss, what does the word conflict mean for you? What does that word conflict mean for you? When you hear the word, we're getting into conflict here, or conflict's going to happen, what does that mean for you? Just turn to the person next to you and talk to each other. Sounds like you could talk for a while too. Okay.
We're in conflict.
You're in conflict. Just over the word conflict.
Husband wife thing. We might need some more help.
It's only been 18 weeks. I want to be right.
Yeah, I'm right, you're wrong. Again, and the reason I get you to do that is because we often have ideas about what conflict is. And unless we're aware of it, it will determine how we go about the process of conflict. So again, we need to be aware, and sometimes we need to work through, what does conflict actually mean for me? Otherwise, I find for a lot of people they get into fear-based stuff, and then that fear-based stuff starts running the process of conflict. And I'm not sure that that's good for us as people.
Well, they start running your life then, can't they?
Oh yeah, and it does for a lot of people. And I see people who get so fearful of conflict, they get into hate stuff. That's where it can go to. So again, we need to be aware of where we stand on the issue of conflict. We may even want to think about, where does God stand on the issue of conflict? What does God think about it? What did Jesus do about it? Those kinds of things. So we can begin to kind of process and think about it. Because I find working in mental health, I come across conflict all the time. And it's, simply because it's an area we often don't know much about. And it's simply we're all trying to do our best, but sometimes there is this conflict and cross purposes that happen. And so you need to be quite clear on it. There are times when I'm called in to advocate for people. I need to be very clear on what conflict means for me, so I can actually advocate for that person, but still maintain a good standing within the system I work in. Does that make sense for people? So there's all those kinds of things we've got to think about and work our way through. And sometimes we get really fearful about getting into conflict. When I get fearful about getting into conflict, I start role-playing stuff in my head. Anyone else? I'm in conflict with someone, I think about the conversation I'm going to have with that person the next day. I know fear is starting to drive that conversation. And I need to actually stop myself and give myself a quick clip around the ear and say, Boise, where are you going with this? What's going on? So for us, we need to be aware of that kind of stuff. Because if we're not, the fear will drive it. And then conflict will not go so well.
Hmm.
Does that make sense for people? So again, it's worth thinking about, it's worth processing. Sometimes it's even worth, you know, you may get into conflict with someone, it's worth having someone around that you can actually debrief with. Just so that you can actually go through and say, this is what happened, this is how it's happened, this is where I thought I was. And this is, you know, this is the outcome of what happened. It's a process so that you can learn to manage conflict differently, or better, or more capably, all those kinds of things. So I find I have to debrief conflict stuff. If you don't think you need to debrief it, you won't do well. Because you need people around you to help you to manage that stuff and deal with it. And again, I will do that a lot for people where they will talk about conflict they're having. So I've got one lady at the moment, her daughter who was in her 40s, she's in her 60s, has ended up in a mental health unit. She's in conflict with not only with her daughter but with the mental health unit. You know, so trying to help her to work through that is really important. But the last thing I want to do is put my own fear into that, does it? So again, that stuff through. So I've said here in the notes that our view of conflict will determine how we respond to conflict and will determine the styles of conflict we use. Now I think there are a couple of styles of conflict that I will talk about today. But there are styles of conflict that we take and get a bit twisted because of the fear, and they make us act in a certain way. There are another way where we can use styles of conflict where the fear isn't there, and it gives us a lot of choice around what am I going to use here today to be able to deal with this. So again, we need to be aware of that. There are some quotes there that I pulled out of the book that look at the issue of conflict, and it says there that when my momentum as a person, my hopes, my dreams, my wants, my needs, my drives run counter to your momentum, there is conflict. I think there is always going to be conflict. I think there is always going to be conflict. I don't care, you know, I think there will always be conflict in some way, shape or form. It goes on to say, sacrifice my momentum is to be untrue to the push and pull of God within me, which I just love that as a little saying. And to negate your momentum is to refuse to be reverent before the presence and work with God within you. So conflict management for me, or dealing with conflict, is sacred business. Because I'm created in the image and likeness of God, and so are you. So I better be aware of that and be aware of that kind of stuff going on. It goes on to say, again, it's not the conflicts that need concern us, but how the conflicts are handled. So again, it's not the conflicts that are a problem, it's how we handle them, how we live our way through them that is really important. Because again, I think there will always be conflict. I think it's going to happen. And again, I think it's going to happen because we all come from different experiences. We all come from different lifestyles, we all come from different expectations, and I think that's going to happen. I think it's going to happen. And again, we need to be aware of that. It goes on to say about views of conflict. Now these views of conflict I've written here. The first one that I've written, number one, is actually when we're actually living well and doing well without the fear. But this is one interpretation of this guy's conflict. He says conflict is seen as being natural, normal, neutral, and sometimes even delightful. How's that? The conflict could be delightful. It may involve pain and may not have had a good outcome. Conflict is viewed as neither good nor bad, right nor wrong. Conflict simply is. There are multiple views to life, and as we live together, those differences will come into sharper focus, and they will provide an opportunity to name differences and to work through with respect and care to a new picture. And so for me, the whole idea of conflict is 2, 3, 4 people coming together, and in that sharing of difference, in that talking about what's going on, to come to a new picture of what life is about and how we go about managing life. That's a very different view of conflict, isn't it? But it's this idea that we can come together, work it through, and then have a completely different picture of what life is about. Now, a few weeks ago I shared about the person that I was working with in a youth group. I got asked to be the youth group leader. Do you remember that conversation? No, you may not have. I got asked to be a youth group leader in one of my local churches when we were down in Mount Gambier. There was another person who was in my team who was quite open and said to me, Mark, I don't think you should be the youth group leader, I should be. Now, if you think that didn't cause conflict, you know, it did. It caused quite a bit of conflict for both of us, and it caused conflict for us as team for quite a while. But there was an incident that happened, and we found ourselves stuck out in sand dunes in the middle of the night with no way of getting out of it unless we worked together. And so we actually had to work together to do that. And after going through that whole process, taking us all night, I think I got home about 8 o'clock in the morning. Carol was just waking up, and I said, I'm just going to bed, I don't care, I've got sand and grit and crap all over me, I'm just going straight to bed, I was buggered. But in that whole process of coming together and having to work together, we came up with a very different picture. And the picture was that we'd been called by God to work together as a team to serve God for young people within our church community. Does that make sense? We came up with a new picture of what it meant to do life or ministry or whatever it was. So for me, conflict is the opportunity, the potential to come up with a new picture of what it means to do life or ministry or family or whatever it is together. Now that's not easy, and I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I think that's the idea that we need to come up with. That's what we're looking for, that's what we're looking to happen. And that's the idea I go into conflict with most people, is I'm looking for a new picture. Because if I go into the conflict with a person and we don't come up with a new picture, we're still different. And we're still not working on the same page. Does that make sense for people? So it's this idea of being on the same page, that conflict is normal, natural, it's part of what happened, it simply is. And for me that takes a lot of stress out of it. It takes the stress out of me having to do stuff or be stuff or work my way through stuff. So it simply is. Now, these other few start to talk about when fear gets involved, and you may need to work through these a bit, but conflict might be viewed as a given, as something that cannot be avoided or worked through. With this view, we might make statements like, we just can't get along. Now, once you start making those kind of statements, you're in serious trouble, because you're already creating more conflict than it's worth, and it goes on to say that we are incompatible. I don't know how that fits in with the gospel message of us being the body and stuff and all those things, because it doesn't in a way. We'll never understand each other, and that's all there is to it. With this view, people will avoid conflict at all costs, will avoid anything that threatens their worldview. Distancing is the way to deal with the issue, and I want out. Thanks very much. Have you ever had someone who's always walking out on you in conflict? Have you had that happen to you? What's it like? What's it like?
It doesn't resolve anything.
Doesn't resolve anything? Yeah.
Frustrating.
It's frustrating.
Feel very isolated.
Feel isolated, yeah.
And you don't feel heard.
You don't feel heard, do you?
No chance to change things.
Yeah, you're stuck in that with that current picture as opposed to coming up with a new picture.
You're stuck, aren't you? Trouble is, it keeps it going as well.
Yeah.
It just keeps the conflict running. So again, you know, that can be a style that people have. Conflict is seen as crushing. If the person clashes with someone, they will be judged or rejected, or the friendship will fall through. This view will make a person have to accommodate and be the nice person, quickly giving in and making others feel comfortable around them. Have you met people like that? Or have you been like that? The nice person, who never creates problems, who's always giving in. What happens to the nice people? They break down, they become a mat. What else happens?
Boundaryless.
They don't have good boundaries.
You only become a mat if you make yourself become a mat.
That's right. But people are choosing in a way to become a mat because they see it's the only way they've got out. Does that make sense? But that's fear stuff starting to get in and starting to get in the way. So again, it's worth thinking through, but all of us will have some kind of fear base that makes us act in particular ways. And we need to kind of think about how we might respond when the fear is getting in the way. Number 4 says conflict might be viewed as an inevitable issue of right or wrong. The person has to defend their truth at all costs and prove the other person wrong. This view will make the person rigid, black and white, judgmental and perfectionist. What do they like to be around? Have you met those people? I've met those people. The fundamental black and white, I'm right, you're wrong, see you later. Yes. But again, what happens when we allow that to keep going? What happens?
You'll dissolve if that's you that's letting it happen to you.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about, but what happens when we allow this to continue to happen?
You are ignored. You ignore it because it's not even worth arguing because they're right.
Yeah, that's right.
You devalue yourself.
So you can end up to the point where, and I've seen this happen for people, where they get to the point where they just feel like they won't even voice a concern because they won't be heard. So they'll get extra quiet. For the person who's being loud all the time, you know, it works.
Yeah, they've got power.
They've got power.
Yeah.
The trouble is they keep doing that stuff. Most of the people they have around them end up dissolving.
Yeah.
And they end up kind of walking away, getting all that kind of stuff. But again, for some people, this is the model they'll choose when the fear gets in. Remember how we talked about boundaries? And people have fears and hurts and stuff? This is the same stuff, but you see it now in the process of conflict. Okay? Number 5 is conflict may be viewed as a mutual difference to be resolved by meeting each other halfway. I will come part way and you come part way. People will compromise on their views and meet the other halfway. This means that people are constantly having to mediate a compromise without moving to a new view or to a new way of viewing the world. So it's all about just compromising all the time. What's that like, when you have to compromise all the time? When you never get to a new view? Have you ever had that happen? I find that in the church a bit sometimes. You just keep compromising and compromising, and I'm not sure that gets you anywhere. I find I get really frustrated.
It doesn't build relationship.
It doesn't build a relationship, and it doesn't build trust either. Because what it is saying is, I'm not going to trust you to come to me, and I'm not going to trust me to come to you. So it doesn't create a good sense of trust, does it? But it's a fear base. It keeps things okay, but you'll never be a team. You'll never work your way through to be a team, to kind of work out how to do this. Can you see how that fear stuff can get in the way? And we talked about that boundary stuff, so remember the boundary stuff and people who have soft boundaries? Well, this will be seen in conflict in the same kind of way. Does that make sense for people? Do you know what is your default? What's your default in these? Turn to the person next to you. Be honest. What's your default? When fear is really cranking up and getting in the way, what's your default? Can you move chairs? But what's your default? For me, I will write people off. I will write them off. It's like they won't even exist in my space. I can do that really well.
Yeah.
You mean
But
as in like, if you're arguing with
If you and I were to have an argument,
please
and I
don't
did,
start
no,
now.
and I got really ticked off with you.
Yeah.
Perhaps you were getting too big or too loud.
Yeah.
Perhaps you were not wanting to kind of come halfway. Perhaps I didn't feel like you were hearing me. I would just wipe your... You could walk into the room and I wouldn't even notice you. That's my default position. It works. But what it does for me is it builds up a whole bunch of tension that becomes unresolved. Does that make sense for you? So I will write you off. Works a bit. Oh no, it does. But it doesn't, it never solves the situation. So what's your default? Looking through some of these, what's your default? Let's come back together. It's all right. Everybody come back in. Now, the reason I do that is because it's important to understand your default position. You need to understand what your default position is. Because if you're being pushed into that default position, it's not healthy. So if I feel like I'm being pushed into my default position, either because I'm not coping with it, or because someone's actually punching all my buttons and I haven't dealt with them, I need to be aware of that. And if I feel I'm getting pushed into a default position, like I just want to wipe this person out, I want to make them invisible, I actually say to people, I need 5 minutes to just simply go away and rethink this. Thanks very much. And I'm quite honest with people that that's where I'm going. And if you want to keep going that way, you may not like the outcome, but I'm quite willing to name that and be aware of it. So when I'm starting to get pushed into that default position, I can actually feel that person becoming invisible. It's like they just blink out the corner of my eye. I can feel it. I've got to a point where I just know that that's how it's happening. Now, if I want to maintain good relationship with people and good relationship with people, all those things, then I can't afford to go into that default position. Does that make sense with you? So I'd much prefer that I be aware of it, and when it happens, I will take the time to step back from that bus. And I will say to people, actually, I need some space just now because I'm not feeling very comfortable with this. I'm happy to talk to you further, but I need 5, 10 minutes, whatever it is, to go away and simply debrief and talk about what's going on. Does that make sense with you? But if you get pushed into a default position, you are just going to react. And it's not going to be good. It's not going to be healthy. And I've done this with people where I've got to my own default position and I've simply wiped them off. And I can do that for a while, let me tell you. It's not just days, but I can do it for months. I'm pretty good at it. I need to make sure I don't get down that road because I've just damaged relationship.
Is wiping people off different from if you know a friend who is toxic that is affecting your life, so you cut ties with them?
Yeah.
Is that different?
Yeah, it is. That's more a boundary. You're starting to get into your boundary stuff and you're starting to say, I need to be safe. And this person is not safe. And so I need to be able to make a decision to step away. But you're starting to talk about having healthy boundaries, because what you're saying is, I'm recognising that this is toxic. That's a different issue. Because you will get into conflict. There's no way knowing you won't. But there are people around us who at various times are toxic, and we need to get... Remember we talked about the boundaries? So we'll need to get geographical distance? Well, that's part of keeping ourselves safe. And I've just used a bit of boundaries to say that I'm not feeling safe because I know I'm going to a default position, so I'm going to pull back for a period of time. Does that make sense? And I'm not pulling back in a way that says I'm going to wipe them off. I'm pulling back in a way that says I need to get back into what this is all about and be very clear about it. Does that make sense for you? So again, it's worth thinking your way through that, but you will all have default positions you go back to. Everyone has them, by the way. And you just need to see people get into a bit of conflict and not resolve it, and you see what happens and you stand back and watch what's going on. But good for us to be able to know that, especially when you're working with people who are particularly unwell. Because they're not going to have the control, are they? They're just not going to have the control. So it's better for us to be in that place and put ourselves in that place. Now, if you go over to the third page, I'm sorry I've messed up my notes somehow, but it talks about the 5 options of conflict. It talks about I'll get them. And again, that number 1 is I'll get them, is the I win you lose scenario. I'm right, you're wrong. The issues are very clear and simple. Someone is totally right and the other person is totally wrong. And again, this stance uses all power and little love or concern for the other. The goal is valued above relationship. So I need to be right. It actually says there's something wrong with the person, by the way.
Yes.
It actually says there's something wrong with the person. My way is the only way. This stance can be, it actually can be very aggressive and cause great rifts in relationships and stuff. And again, I've seen it happen in the life of the church where people say, I'm right, you're wrong. And if I've got the right answer, then I'm going to heaven and to glory or wherever it is. I'm sorry, but you're not. And we've had great fights over it, but it's never a good way to go. Because it just tears at people and tears at the body. Another way is I'll get out. Is a way to deal with conflict. The idea here is that I don't feel I have much control or say in the conflict. And it can be a view that people cannot change and will overlook them or withdraw. So again, my withdrawing is they just become invisible. I'll give in is another one, is I'll just keep accommodating that person. I'll just keep accommodating them. Again, I'm never sure that kind of particularly works, but for some people that's their default position. I'll just keep accommodating, giving in, staying nice, being a doormat. The trouble is that being a doormat, what happens to your anger? Simmers. Sorry?
It'll go back.
It'll go bang, and it will. Or become depression, another stress. Can you hear that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
So again, you need to be aware of that kind of way or default position you have. And again, sometimes when the anger goes bang, it can go bang at the wrong person. We talk about coming home and kicking the dog. Well, it may be that we come home and we actually give it to someone else instead of to the person we're meant to give it to. So again, need to be aware of that. Again, the idea of I'll meet you halfway, again, is just kind of keeps, I'm not sure it ever helps to manage change. I don't think it brings about change. I don't think it helps in any way, shape or form. Does that make sense for people? So again, you all have those default positions and it's just good to be aware of them. It's good to actually have someone who is aware of them for you. So, I have some people at work that actually keep an eye on you. Do you have people that keep an eye on you? I have people that keep an eye on me, just to make sure I'm doing okay. And sometimes if they see me getting into a bit of conflict and it's not going well, they actually kind of let me know. I had one person in one church I was working at who would let me know how I'm going around my coffee stuff after church on a Sunday. Oh no, they would actually keep an eye on me. That was their, and I gave them permission to do that. So that they could, I gave them permission. But again, it just helped me to keep knowing what's going on. So I had this feedback stuff going on. And again, good way to do it. But I gave people permission to do that. Who have you given permission to do? To kind of watch your back? It's worth thinking about. Especially, when we talk about working in mental health, providing pastoral care. And again, pastoral care, people come to us because things aren't going well. They may come to us and say, Mark, this is going great, I'm really enjoying this, but most often it's, Mark, things aren't going too well here, and I need a bit of a hand. So you're walking that conflict line a lot of the time in pastoral care, I think, so being aware of it's really important. If you go back to the second page, sorry, I don't know how I messed up these notes. I have to go back and look at them. Now, I talked about there in about the second or third paragraph, the 5 options of conflict without the personalisation, without the fear. Now, I like Augsburger's work because what he's done is taken this model and made it so it's actually like a revolver, so you can pull out the bullet when you need it and use it. Does that make sense for people? So it's adaptable, it's flexible. So again, his first option there is conflict is seen as being natural, normal and neutral. And he talks about the idea of care-fronting, which is an interesting topic, isn't it? An interesting way of expressing it. But he says care-fronting is offering genuine caring that bids itself and the other to grow. To care is to welcome, invite and support growth in both self and the other. Care-fronting is offering real confrontation that calls out new insight and understanding. To confront effectively is to offer the maximum of useful information with the minimum of threat or stress. That's, again, interesting, isn't it? Care-fronting unites love and power. It unifies concern for the relationship with concern for goals. And then he goes on to say, if care-fronting is not possible, so if two people aren't able to come together, and they aren't able to do it in such a way where love is actually the key, and coming to a new position is not the key, he suggests you try other things. Now, he's suggesting you try other things so that you can keep the relationship going to the point where there is a change. Does it make sense for people? So it's this kind of revolving stuff that you will use that helps you to maintain the relationship with the idea of moving it ahead so that you can come to a new picture or a new understanding. Now, sometimes that is not going to happen. Sometimes you'll try all of these and it won't happen. And that's where you need to start using your boundary stuff. That way you need to start using it. Remember the model of change we talked about? We talked about the model of change. This stuff comes into play as well. If I use all of these and I'm working with someone and there is no change going on, I've got to start asking the questions about where is this person going. And I may need to use my boundary stuff to keep me safe and to make some decisions around it. Does that make sense? But this whole model is about helping people to move forward, to keep the relationship going so that we can come up with a new picture or a new idea. And again, when I'm working with people, this is kind of the revolving drum for me, and I'll use it and use it and use it in order to keep the relationship moving or stable or enough to a point where that person says to me, Mark, actually I'm willing to hear what you have to say on this. And again, it's just a model that we've got that can help us to do that. But it actually gives us choice in what we're going to do and how we're going to go about it. Some of the other models I see around conflict management, they're not as flexible or adaptable. They just have these strategies, bang, 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 bang. And if they don't work, well, you just let it go. I'm not sure that's healthy. I much prefer to have a more adaptable model that I can actually choose from and incorporate other models into it as well. So that's why I'm suggesting you may need to go back over your notes at some stage and look at, the boundary stuff, the model of change stuff. Some of those other things we've actually talked about as well. I'm not sure, did we talk about grieving and mental illness stuff? Even that grieving stuff, sometimes people, when they're in a grieving process because of loss and change, will not do conflict well. And so we need to be aware of that. So what I'm asking you to do is to begin to incorporate some of those models so that you can do pastoral care well. And again, that's always helpful for us to be able to do. So he says, if care fronting is not possible, you may move to cooperative compromise. This is hopefully a temporary solution which will open the opportunity to move towards enhanced caring and increased openness and honesty. He goes on to say, if this fails, it might be wise to move towards a yield to maintain relationship starts. And there are sometimes where I'll actually yield on what someone wants so I can actually keep the relationship going. So someone came to me the other day and said, I've known this person for a number of years. They've ended up in hospital. The Housing Trust have decided they need to shift. Good on our old Housing Trust. But she now finds herself under huge amounts of stress and not able to tolerate much stress at all. but having to shift nonetheless. And the Housing Trust have said, oh, we'll help you, but the help they've given is not particularly good. And so she's left distressed. But she's quite argumentative at the moment. She's irritable and grumpy. You've met those people? You know, and I've known her for a number of years, but right at this moment she's very irritable. She asked me the other day if I'd go and get her clothes. Did I want to go and get her clothes? Did I want to go into a house and get her clothes on a perfectly good Saturday? No way. But I knew if I did that, if I ceded to that, we would maintain the relationship. Does that make sense? So for me, it's thinking through what's best for the relationship and how can I manage the conflict stuff going on here so that we can keep moving to a different picture. Does that make sense? Yeah? So again, if this fails, it might be wise to move to a win-loss stance of affirming goals even at the cost of sacrificing relationships. And sometimes that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, actually, the goal of getting this done is more important than us being here together at this stage. You may not like me, but that's what I'm going to do. And so sometimes there are people, you know, times where I have to ring the police, or I have to ring, you know, mental health services or whatever it is, or I need to back away for a period of time from someone. But I'm in a goal mode here, and I'm wanting this person to be safe, so I will do that. Does that make sense for people? So it's taking that model and adapting it and using it. He also talks about the last choice is to leave and withdraw from the relationship. The other's right to refuse, reject or withdraw for a period of time, and after a period of time checking out what is happening for the person. And I always do that with people. There may be a time where we simply withdraw. That's the best thing to do. And I had one lady that I worked with for a period of time, and she said to me, "Mate, mental health services just diagnosed me with this and this and this. What do you think?" And I said, "Oh, I think they're right." She got so ticked off with me. And I just thought it's safer to back away for a while and withdraw. And then she came back to me a couple of months later and said, "Mark, I think you're right." But for me, I use that model to find out what's the best solution here so that I can be safe, so that she can be safe, so we can move the relationship forward. Does that make sense? The last thing it talks about there is mediation by a third party may be an option. Again, sometimes we may need to call in a third person to actually come and mediate for us. And again, I've done that with people where I've said, "This is not working, is it?" And so we may need to actually do something different. How about we call in and we'll agree on someone that we think is okay to come in and help us talk it through, someone to work it through. Does that make sense? But again, this is the model that he would talk about. And I think it's a very usable model, but the whole aim of the model is to move the relationship towards having that new idea, that new vision, that new picture, but adapting it as you go. Does that make sense for people? But again, I find when I'm working with people who are really unwell, their ability to control, all that kind of stuff, their impulse control goes out the window. I find this model works very well all the time. And again, it's always keeping me on track then. Because sometimes we get so caught up in conflict stuff that we lose idea of what we're on about. This model says we're actually on about relationship, and we're on about creating a new picture, and how best can we do that. You have to practice it, by the way. You have to practice it. You have to practice and practice and think about it. You may want to grab the book. It may be a resource you grab for people here at the church. It may be a book you can use as a study, by the way. But again, we've taken it and used it and adapted it as a group. But if you're going to be in pastoral care, I would say it's something you need to do, to be quite aware of, because it's going to happen. Not everyone is nice, are they? Not everyone, you know, doing well, being well, you know, they're just not going to be that way. So being able to be aware of that's really important, and taking the time to do that's really important. But I find it keeps me safe, and it keeps me on track, and it allows me space to be able to work out where are we in this relationship, what's going on, what's happening here. And so again, it asks me different questions that help me to be able to move through this and do this. So have a think about it, but it may be a model that you can use. I haven't come across many other models that are adaptable as this. Has anyone else done conflict mediation and stuff? Anyone done courses on it?
I've looked into a bit of Marshall Rosenberg.
Right, yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
UBC.
yeah,
That's listening to the person's emotion they're trying to transfer
Yeah.
to you amongst all the,
yeah, all the other stuff that's going on here.
yeah.
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 It's worth checking into, but again, I would say in pastoral care, you are going to come across this stuff. And in helping you to survive and do well, you need to know about conflict. It's not going to not happen, is what I'm going to suggest. It also helps you to deal with that transference, counter-transference stuff going on as well. Helps you to keep track of what's going on and helps you to stay quite plugged in to the relationship and what's going on. Okay, what's the time? Let's look at go over the page. We'll start looking at chapter 2, the truth when in conflict. Okay, let's have a break for 5-10 minutes and then we'll come back and finish this stuff off. All right? Let's do that now. Truth telling is always important in conflict. Sometimes we don't do that so well. One of the first things we need to remember is that 87% of all communication is done through our body language.
That much?
That 87%. So they've just, some of the research I've just read recently has upped that up quite significantly to 87%. So that's tone of voice, facial features, body position, the way you hold your body, body distance from people, all that kind of stuff communicates more than you simply the words you speak. So when you're in communication with people, you need to be very aware of that. And the whole idea is that your body language and what the words you actually say actually match up.
Is it like if you're like in someone's space or something and they feel uncomfortable about that?
Yeah.
You just,
Yeah.
yeah.
So again, it's about matching that up so that when people who are perhaps unwell, not doing well, actually get a very clear message from you.
It's really an encouragement to be honest with our words, isn't it? Since they're going to be getting the message from our body anyway.
You're going to get the message from your body anyway. And the other thing is if you're not congruent between words and body language stuff, you are going to get used. You will get used. What I've found, especially with difficult people, and we talked about difficult people, didn't we? Difficult people are particularly good at picking up on your body language and where the incongruencies are with what you say and what your body language is saying. I don't know how they do it, but I know they're particularly good at it.
Can you give us an example?
Well, if you come up to me and you say, Mark, I need you to go and get, something for me.
You look angry right
And
now.
I look angry, but I say, oh, that's okay. I can do it for you.
Especially when your arms folded. Yeah. Defensive.
Yeah, but I'm also saying something different. I'm saying, yeah, I can do that. My body language is completely different, isn't it?
Yeah.
People are going to pick up on that. What they're going to do is believe more what your body language is saying than what your words are actually saying to start with. So that's going to cause conflict straight away. So you need to be aware of that. But it also becomes a way that people can manipulate you. And they can say things, I like you looking like you don't really like me. And they can kind of say, have you heard that stuff? I'm hoping you have, because you will have in some way, shape or form, where people will do that to you. So again, truth telling is really important because our body language will give you away as quick as blink. And then your words will come into play, and if they don't match up, you will get run over the place without even a blink of an eye. So again, You need to kind of practice that stuff and be aware of that stuff. You need to be aware of your body distance and being safe. In fact, they talk about it being like a canoe, like the need for our body distance is like a canoe around us. So if people are standing in front of us, we actually need more distance. If people are standing on the side of us, we don't need as much body distance because we feel safer. If someone's behind us, we need more distance. Does it make sense? And it's the same for other people as well. They will need that. So even when I'm getting into conflict with people, I will not stand over them or in front of them. And you just have to know what that feels like. Just so you start to go back then, you can pick that stuff up. So you need to be quite aware if you're going to be in conflict or do conflict, you need to be very aware of how you're using your body language. And are you using it in such a way to help settle things down, or are you arcing them up? And if you're going to tell truth, you need to make sure that your body language and what you're saying match up. You need to do that.
Which really means you need to know your own heart and mind, don't you?
That's right. Yeah. So I have sometimes two conversations going on in my head. Like, what's really happening for me? What are some of the emotions I'm feeling at the moment? Those kinds of things. I have those kinds of conversations going on in my head. And I've just learned over the years that they're the kind of conversations I have, because I want to be quite clear about what's going on. If I want to do conflict with people and I want to be able to maintain the relationship and come up with a new picture, this stuff has to work well. So I need to make it work well. The other thing that's interesting that they talk about is this idea of mirroring. Have people heard of it? I use it all the time when I'm working with people, and I want to know if I'm on the same page as someone. So can I just borrow that chair? But mirroring, I always use it, and I don't know why people don't, but I just learned to use it so I can actually, work alongside people. But if I'm working with someone and I'm talking to them, so I'm going to use you again, so, if I'm working with them and we're talking and we're discussing stuff and we're starting to make connections, if I'm sitting like this, I will mirror what's going on in that person's body language. Now, we'll sit and we'll talk for a while. Now, what I find is if I move and they move with me, guess what? We're connected.
Yeah.
They're
If
actually
I do
feeling
this, you
safe.
haven't got the hair.
Oh, that's hard. That is hard. That is really hard.
But again, if I do that and she moves with me, we're on the same page. If she doesn't move, we're still not quite connecting here. There's something going on and I need to ask a question.
Or do you move your position back to where she was?
Well, I'll sit and chat for a while and I'll work out what's going on and whether she's feeling safe. I may shift my chair around a bit more so that I can give her more space, those kinds of things, the body distance stuff, those kinds of things. And then again, I may shift again and mirror that position, and I may change again. If she changes, I'm on the same page. If she doesn't, we're not on the same page.
What
We're
about,
actually made to mirror.
what about over the phone?
Yeah.
You hang up on
Guess
someone.
what? I hate phones.
That's what it's in.
Phones are a different matter. Phones are more working off tone of voice. And so sometimes you need to match tone of voice. But it actually works, this mirroring stuff. We're actually made or wired to mirror. And that's actually why sometimes when we're actually doing pastoral care counselling stuff, we can actually find ourselves getting quite traumatised by people's story, because we mirror, we take on board, we kind of empathise with. We're actually designed for mirroring, by the way. And so we can find ourselves, you go and do some pastoral care and you walk away, "Crap, I'm really traumatised by that." Well, guess what? That's the mirroring stuff that's going on. And you just naturally soak it up without even realising what's going on. And again, let me reinforce with you, that's why it's always good to actually debrief, to take time afterwards to think what went on there, what happened for me, what do I need to do to manage this, all that kind of stuff, especially if it's been difficult. You need to do that because you will automatically mirror stuff, take on board what's going on. You will empathise with it. So again, you need to be aware of that stuff that's happening. But again, I always use the mirroring stuff and I'm always looking to use it. I'm always aware of body language and how it speaks to people. I try to be. There are some days when I don't do so well at it. But again, I'm trying to do that so I can actually continue to build the relationship. Does that make sense with people so far? And let me tell you, you can practice this stuff. You can practice it in groups of people. Practice it when you have coffee. It's the best thing to do, is when you have coffee after church. Practice it. Oh no, just, you know, you can be having coffee and simply step in on someone that you're having coffee with. See what happens. What does their body language say? What do? Do they lean back? Do they lean in? All that kind of stuff. Check it out. Where do you feel most comfortable? Some people have bigger spaces. They need bigger spaces in order. You need to work out what your space is like. So on a good day, when things are going really well, what's your body space like? It'll be smaller by then. When you're not feeling so good, guess what? And I realise that for a lot of people who are unwell or who are struggling, their body distance is going to be bigger. So if I have people that I'm working with that I've known for a long period of time and I know they've come into hospital or they've rung me and said, Mark, I need to see you, and I've known them for a long time, and normally I would give them a hug. I don't normally go straight up and give them a hug because I realise they may need bigger body space around them and I need to check that out. Does that make sense for people? So you need to be very aware, 87%, that's a high lot of people who will use body language. Now the idea of truth telling is very important because it helps to match up that body language stuff. It creates a congruence about what's happening. And again, truth telling is really, really important. We don't value it enough, but it's really important. And when I see Jesus telling truth, there are things that Jesus says, and I just say, how does he get away with that? What's going on there? But his body language and what he says must have matched up so well that people just said, yeah, I get that. And so again, it's this whole idea of how do we match it up, how do we do it well together, especially when conflict is around. You need to be really aware of that stuff. And so even again, if someone's kind of wanting to argue with me and stuff, I become very aware of what my body language is saying. Because there are times when my anger starts to rise. Do you get your anger going? You need to be aware of that anger stuff, because sometimes your body language will give you away as quick as blink before you've even got into conflict with the person. And have you met people you don't like? Who here has met people they don't like? We'll go around with the camera and show you. Again, our body language will sometimes give us away before we've even had a chance to even talk to that person or say hello to them. We need to be aware of that stuff so that we can communicate well and do it. But if you go down to the bottom of that first page, again, these are notes that Pam wrote, and she says, I want to speak honestly. Truthing is trusting others with my actual feelings and viewpoints. That's interesting, isn't it? I'm actually going to trust someone with my viewpoints and with my feelings. Avoiding honest statements of real feelings and viewpoints is often considered kindness, thoughtfulness, or generosity. We think we're actually being nice to the person when we do this, that they can't handle the truth. Remember that movie, You Can't Handle the Truth? But again, I think we get into that. More often, she goes on to say, it's the cruelest thing I can do to others. It is benevolent lying. Selective honesty is not honesty at all. And she says, sometimes I find myself using it. It's interesting, isn't it? That we can say and do things that perhaps aren't honest. Our feelings, our emotions, what we actually think is happening, all those kinds of things. And when that happens, you are not going to manage conflict well. It just won't go well. You'll get into those default positions and you'll either get run over or your anger will just ramp up and kind of go over the top. So she says, I find myself using it to avoid real relationships with others when I'm too rushed or tired to give them my time. And so sometimes when we're doing pastoral care, we need to actually be aware of the time we've got. So when I'm actually working with people and around people, people often say to me, Mark, you're so busy, all that kind of stuff. I actually reassure them that this is the time I've got, and I'll state the time that I've got to work with people. I'll say, actually no, we've booked in an hour, I'm happy to do the hour, and I'm happy then to make whatever it is, make another time, do whatever that is. But I'm going to be very sure of the time I've got with that person. If it's only 10 minutes, I'm going to tell them it's only 10 minutes. And then I'll say, can we make another time to catch up, or is there someone else you need to see, that kind of stuff. Does that make sense? But you know, if you're too rushed or too tired, the other thing I often say to people is, can we make another time that's suitable? So for a lot of my people, they know not to ring me late at night, because I just don't function well. You ring me at 12 o'clock at night with a problem, I'm probably going to say a few things that won't be helpful for that person or for me later on. But again, if you realise you're too tired or can't manage this, make another time. But that's just good pastoral care, but being aware of time so that we don't say things, don't get into platitudes, all that kind of stuff is really important. She goes on to say that sometimes we do it to avoid clear confrontation with others, because we know if we tell the truth, there may be some confrontation here, there may be some conflict. And again, sometimes I use that model that we've talked about, that revolving model. Sometimes I may yield to that person, other times I'm thinking, actually no, now's the time for me to be honest here and to say what's going on. And so again, last week I had that young lady come to me who had quite a severe drug problem. And you know, I was feeling a bit tired. But for me, her issue was really important, and so I needed to attend to that. So I tended to put that stuff on hold. But she wanted me to say other things that, you know, oh, it's everyone else's fault. Have you had people say that to you? And I heard her story, it's mum's fault, it's dad's fault, it's that. And I thought, oh, do I go along with this or don't I? You know, I could go along with it, and I'd probably get her on side of it, but I don't know how much longer that'd last until she was saying to me, Mark, actually it's your fault. Does that make sense for people? And so for me, I heard that, and I actually stopped and said, okay, is this truth-telling time or not? And I decided it was truth-telling time. And I actually had to say to her, look, you've had this problem for actually a long, long time, and you've probably never been to a psychiatrist, and you've never actually dealt with this, and I think this is what you need to do. That was my truth-telling to her. I could have just agreed that everyone else was the problem, but I decided not to at that stage. Does that make sense for people? But for her, she actually knew where I was standing. And she knew that before we were going to move on, she needed to go and see a psychiatrist. I don't know if she's done that yet. I mean, I know it takes 6 to 8 weeks sometimes to get in to see a psychiatrist. But I said, you know, when you've done that, come back and see me. Because I don't think I can actually help you until then. Because I don't know what the problem is. So that was my truth-telling. Does that make sense for people? So again, you know, I could have avoided the confrontation, but I decided to go the other way. We can use it to manipulate situations or fact or protect myself or to protect others. We can even tell little white lies to protect ourselves or to kind of protect others. And we need to be aware of that if you tell a lie, you better remember to cover it up well along your tracks, because you'll be caught at some stage. But again, we need to be very aware of that kind of stuff, that we can actually try and manipulate or control by some of the things we tell people. And that may be because we have a fear ourselves that this may not go well, or it may. But again, does that make sense for people? So again, you need to be aware of that truth-telling stuff. Because again, it can backfire or it can have real problems. She goes on to say that such defence systems, no matter what sort of safety they promise, are not useful. She says it's actually necessary to be truthful in all situations. That's interesting, isn't it? We should pay others the compliment of believing they too value honesty and can handle honest feelings. We should be able to truthfully express what we feel, where I am, how we think, in appropriate ways in an appropriate environments. And again, sometimes when we're caught in pastoral care situations that are a bit sticky, all that kind of stuff, you know, the temptation is not to tell truth. And again, when you do that, you've got to think about, where are we going? What's the relationship going to be like? Will we come to a new picture? Will we be able to manage this? Will I build trust with this person? All those kinds of things. So again, people know if they're going to come to me, I'm known for not being nice. And that's okay. But I'm known for actually being honest. And if you want some honest answers, come and see Mark. And that's something I've had to practice, by the way. So I'm very aware of when I'm about to tell a lie. Are you aware when you're about to tell a lie? Anyone else? You aware when you're about to tell a lie? You need to be. You need to be quite aware of, you know, if you're going to tell a lie, if you're not going to be truthful with what's going on. Because it may be that you do it for a specific reason, but most often it's because we want to be nice, or we don't want to get caught in it, or whatever it is. It's that fear-based stuff again. So again, we need to be quite aware of that.
I think what would help with that would be to accept that perhaps when you're arguing with this person, that to remember that they might, that everyone's different, but some people tend to treat everyone else the same as well, and that it's not just you that they're going nuts about.
Yeah. Oh no, it never is.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a bit like when people say to me, Mark, oh, you can't go on holidays because I can't manage without you. And I go on holidays and they manage. You know, there are always other people around that they can talk to or be with. So again, it's that kind of stuff going on. But it's, and you, again, it's something we need to sort through and work out. Are we going to be truth tellers? And if you feel yourself starting to, I can formulate this lie, then you need to ask yourself some questions about where you're going and what's happening and what you want out of this. And again, for me, that's the most important thing, is actually understanding why I'm doing this and why I want to be truthful or not truthful, and how can I best do it. But again, I think she shows some really good insight. She goes on, if you go over the page, to that last page there. Sorry, there's no notes on there, but you can tell her that. She's actually, and I think I agree with, she's actually of the opinion that why questions are not good questions. Why did that happen? Why did you do this? She's actually of the opinion that it's covert ways of attempted control, which is interesting, isn't it? She says, try eliminating why from relationships and ask what and how questions. These offer all the information I need to know to relate effectively. Why doesn't ask a simple question. It tends to evaluate and judge motives and intentions. What or how deal with what is wanted in our relationships and how can we get it. She gives an example there. Why can't you pick up your wet towel after you've showered?
I'll tell you an absolute classic of that. We had a 13-year-old grandson he goes from sort of... She goes on to say, what stops you from picking up your wet towel? It's a different question, isn't it? So one comes across as a bit threatening. The other one actually asks people, what stops you from doing this? It's actually inquisitive, starting to ask, what stops this from
I
happening?
guess them to name their own issue if they don't know why. If they're lazy, why don't they pick up? They're not going to go because I'm lazy.
Yeah.
You know? But what stops you from picking out? They question themselves and go, I'm lazy.
Yeah.
You know?
So it's actually putting the responsibility back on them. Can you hear that? Whereas why is always kind of threatening, all that kind of
You
stuff.
almost get them to come out with a why in that case too.
Yeah.
Work them around.
Yeah. So it's that kind of what, how stuff she says is important. She says the why question is perceived as a trap, which is interesting. When the listener tries to explain why, the question may respond by saying our why answer was no good. what or how deal with what is wanted in relationships, and how can we get it. So again, take a chance to read through her notes, but again, she also talks about the idea of getting trapped by questions. Why did you say or do that? Didn't you once say? I'm very aware when I'm working with people and we're in a bit of conflict, once I hear people start asking those kinds of questions, I realise that they're trying to trap me into something. And you need to be very careful when you're getting into conflict with someone or they're coming at you a bit. They will want to trigger you. And so sometimes they will ask those kinds of questions to try and trigger what's happening in you so that they can get a response out of you and make you kind of lose control of it. Does that make sense for people? So I'll often have people say to me, "Didn't you say that?" And I may have a long time ago, but it's not relevant for now. And so again, you need to be aware that sometimes people, because they don't manage conflict well themselves, will try and trap you or catch you. And you need to be aware of that kind of stuff as well, because it can come the other way, can't it? So sometimes people will try and do that to us and we need to actually pull up on it. I get a bit angry when people do that to me. What about you? I start to feel my jaw kind of starting to go a bit tight and my head starting to kind of flush a bit. Anyone else like that? They're the signs for me that I'm picking up that someone is starting to say questions to me that may not be helpful for me in this kind of situation to work my way through it. And again, I've learned to listen to those. And I've learned to ask questions about, actually, what's going on here? What is this person doing? Why are they saying what they're saying? Does that make sense for people? But again, we also need to listen for sometimes because other people are not going to be truthful with us. So we want to be truthful, we want to maintain that honesty, that integrity, but sometimes people are not going to do it to us. So they'll ask other questions that will try and trap us. And you need to be able to step back from that bus too. And again, I feel it coming, I can feel my jaw clenching. And I'm even stepping back now, I feel myself start to step back from that a bit. And I'm asking those kind of questions, what is going on here? And sometimes, if I'm really smart and I'm on top of it all, I'll go back with the why question. I'll say, why are you saying this to me now? What's the reason? And you want to watch people run. Let me tell you, they start to, often they'll back off after that when I say, I'm not sure why you're saying this to me now. What's happening? What's going on for you? And it brings people up short, but I've found it actually works. If I'm smart enough to see it coming, it's really useful for me and actually helps me to be able to manage what's going on. Does that make sense for people? You have to learn it though. It's practice, 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 and having someone around that can actually help you to do that. Having someone to help you to be able to do that, especially in your pastoral care work, having someone around to help you to do that is really important. Again, that debriefing stuff, talking it through, is always important. And again, I know I've got people I can come up to and I can say, I don't think that went very well today with this person, and I can rattle off what it was, and they're ready to listen to me. Does that make sense for people? Do you have a tag team here at church? In your pastoral care?
I don't think so.
It's basically like having a pastoral carer for
Yes.
pastoral care.
That's right, yeah. Do you have it even set up within the life of your church so that if you have someone like who's in distress at the front of your church sometimes and they come up to you and say, I need to see you, I need to speak with you?
There's elements, there's life group leaders, there's prayers after church.
Okay.
There is a structure of the church.
Because sometimes there are going to be people that you're not going to feel up to managing or dealing with.
Yeah.
Do you have a tag team?
Generally, elders would be
Elders would be the way to go? You need to know that, by the way. You need to know that there is someone that will be there to back you up, just in case. Because there will be times when you don't feel like getting into this, for whatever reason. You may be feeling tired, flat, low, you may have been around the same ground with this person again, whatever it is, you need a tag team.
Dan, is that something you could take to a church council meeting?
Yeah, we certainly look at Strengthening what we've got.
Oh, look, I think it's important. Again, Carol and I were up at a particular church, and we had one lady who was just hell on wheels. Loved it a bit, but she would target in on people, and she would just go to them. Because she was distressed and not doing well and all kinds of stuff.
As in like pushing people's buttons.
Pushing people's buttons, all kinds of stuff. So we set up a tag team. And we knew that person, if they went to someone, there would be always someone else that would go and stand alongside. And it's that idea of having a tag team. So if you get in too deep or things aren't working out well, you have someone that you can actually go to and say, I need a hand here. And they can come into the picture. Does that make sense for people? I think it's, in the life of churches, we don't do that stuff well. We kind of expect people to just manage it and deal with it, but that may not be the case. And so you need people around that you know I can call on. This is my tag person.
I think a lot of people might just pretend that everything's fine and happy and they have their smile on their face when things aren't going all that well.
Yeah.
They just don't want to talk about stuff, and I guess it's not avoiding.
But the other idea of having a tag person is when you don't think you can be truthful.
Yes.
You may be a bit stressed, not up to it, all that kind of stuff. Good to have someone else you can tag team into this. And that knows they'll be there for you. Again, I think that's really important stuff in the life of churches. And again, you guys you do lots of ministry around the place, which is really great. But that means you're going to have other people coming who are quite different. Different ideas or different things going on in their lives. You need the tag team. Yeah. And I think it's worth talking about and working way through.
Years ago I had a situation where 4 people became my wagons,
Yeah.
and they were the go-to people when you're in a crisis situation to access you and have those. And they referred to them as being the wagon, for setting up the wagons. These are the people, if you get contacted by things, just shoot us that information and we'll go deal with them. And it was really very comforting and very secure. So when you're on the inside of that sort of thing, so that's another way of looking at it.
It's another way of looking at it, But I much prefer churches set up tag teams. So that there's always someone to go to for whatever situation that's happening. Again, that just makes good sense to me. I mean, I have it at work all the time because, I go and do my chaplaincy work. I know I've always got chaplains around that I can tag team with. I have struggled with this person today. Can you go and see them tomorrow? Or I can talk to the chaplain that's going to go and see them, and I can say, look, I've been to see this person. I think this is what the issues are. You go and see them. Perhaps we can talk about it afterwards. So there's that tag teaming going on. And it works well. And it means it's not all my responsibility to try and fix the conflict or whatever's going on. Does that make Okay, so have a think about it, but I think it's really important. And the last thing I'm going to deal with is the idea of anger. And again, you'll need to read up on this, but I think anger is really important. I think owning our anger, understanding our anger, being aware of when our anger is around is really, really important in pastoral care. Anger lets us know when someone is actually treading over our boundaries. Anger lets us know that someone is saying or doing something to us that may be inappropriate, unwanted, unneeded, not necessary. And again, anger is often, we'll feel it, and we'll feel it in our bodies before we even think about it. And so for me, anger is really important in those kind of pastoral care kind of conversations I have with people, but they help keep me grounded when I actually understand the anger and what's going on. So I think anger is actually really important. And I think it's healthy when we know how to use it and use it well. Anger, when it's not used well, can go one of 2 ways. So the anger can happen where that person just is the doormat and gets run over and gets run over. And eventually that anger goes somewhere else that may not be helpful. It can either come out on the person as a high amount of stress and they may end up with kind of stress-related illnesses. Or it may go where they dump it on somewhere else. The other way it can go is into rage, and we see a bit of that these days with road rage stuff, don't we? And people doing kind of crazy, silly things. They're the extremes of rage. Anger is another thing altogether. Anger is something that we're aware of that helps us to be in control. That sounds strange, doesn't it? But I know when I'm starting to get angry, I'm starting to ask questions. What is going on here? What is this person trying to get out of me? What do they want from me? Or are they saying or doing something that is disrespectful of me as a person, as a child of God? Does that make sense for you? So we need to be more aware of our anger and how we use it and when it's bubbling up. So I can always tell my anger, I get the jaw clench. I can start feeling it. And I don't talk well. But I can also feel myself starting to flush. If I'm not aware of it, it goes down to my fists. And I clench my fists. That's my body language going off. Never helpful, by the way. When I go to meet someone else, and someone else has really pissed me off, and I've still got this stuff I haven't dealt with, and I meet someone, guess what I'm doing to them? I'm just dumping all my anger, all my body language is going towards them. Does that make sense? So being aware of anger is really important. I think it's really useful in conflict stuff, in pastoral care, and I think we need to understand it well. I think within our Western culture we've been taught that anger is not a good thing.
Especially for Christians.
Oh yes, Christians never get angry and they never get upset. Yes. They're always nice. That's not a picture I have of Jesus actually. So it's not a picture I have of Jesus at all. I think Jesus got quite angry at times. And I think we need to pick up that model a bit more and be able to use it. But again, Jesus was able to do it in such a way that people still felt they could be around him and be with him, even though he got angry and said something to them that said, actually, this is as far as you go. He was able to use that. So again, I've said in the notes here, and you may want to read through them. You may want to, again, that book on anger here is really good, but I think there are lots of books around on anger, but again, I found this one really useful because she actually goes through and looks at the uses of anger and how our Western culture has kind of distorted it round. So again, her last name is Tavris, Tabris, but again, it's a bit old, but again, she does a good job of looking at that. She also looks at the idea of background anger and how it can affect us as well. So again, interesting concepts and ideas. So again, have a look at the notes. But again, I think we need to, as pastoral carers, we need to be quite aware and use anger. So again, I've had people come up to me and they try to get me to do stuff that I'm not prepared to do, and they get into that, all that kind of blackmailing stuff. Have you had that happen to you? My anger flares. And so I actually listen to that and I say, what's going on here? What's happening? What is this person trying to do? And if I'm smart enough and work out what's going on, I actually ask the question, what is it you really need me to do? And I'm going to be quite clear on that. What is it you need me to do, or what is it you want me to do for you? But I'll ask that question. That's the question I ask. What is it you need, or what is it you want me to do? Be very clear on it. Because then I can make a decision about whether I'm going to do this or not. And again, we need to be aware of that. And it's actually putting the responsibility back on the person then to name quite clearly what is it they want or need from me or from whatever's going on. And again, when people are often in conflict or they're often in high rates of stress, they don't feel they can do things. So it's very easy to kind of punch your buttons and get you to do it so that they don't have to do it. So again, I had one lady who logged into hospital just recently, had not been managing her life well, had gone AWOL from the hospital. She'd just gone AWOL, just walked off. And I rang, because, you know, the unit rang me because they knew I knew her and said, oh, have you seen her today? And I said, no, I haven't seen her, but I'll give her a ring and let her know. So I rang and just said, oh, look, we're a bit concerned. You haven't been back to the hospital. And she actually then rang me a while later on and said, oh, you just go and tell them I'm okay. And my anger fled, and I said, actually, I can't do that for you. I'm not prepared to do that for you. They need to hear from you that you're actually okay. But she wanted me to do it. Does that make sense? But my anger flared, and I said, actually, no, I'm not prepared to do that. Now, that was a good thing for me to do, because I was putting myself into the middle. And there's no way knowing I want to put myself in the middle. Does that make sense? But my anger picked it up quicker than I did. So again, I had to listen to that and say, I'm not prepared to do that. And this is what you need to do. She got pissed off with me. Told me a few things about myself that I'd never known before.
Well, that's what she desired.
Yeah.
She wanted you as a middleman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was not
And
prepared.
she didn't get that.
She gave me a few choice words, told me what it was like. She's now come back to me a little while later and said, Mark, actually I was really wrong. So we've been able to do some kind of mending of the relationship. But again, I heard the anger first. Does that make sense? So we need to use anger as a friend in our pastoral care and use it as an ally. If we're going to have good communication, if we're going to know what's going on for us, we need to be able to do that. Being nice won't always cut it, I'm afraid. Because we'll just get run over. And then when you run over, what happens? When you run over and you give up, don't you? Yeah. Or you get tired, or you get burnt out.
And then you're useless.
And then you use
You can lose yourself, I think, in that situation as well.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah.
And I could have said to, oh yes, I'll ring them up and I'll let them know you're okay.
And they'll use you for something else down the track as
Yeah.
well.
So can you hear that? We need to use our anger as an ally, especially around issues around conflict and people not being well, all those kinds of things. And we need to learn to listen to it. You'll all have signs and symptoms about your body getting angry. Do you know what the early warning signs are for you when you're starting to get angry?
Heart rate.
Your heart rate? Yeah, but is that anxiety or anger?
Well, I had an incident on Monday night actually. It's quite interesting. I don't know, I want to say, I can feel it just bubbling, simmering away.
Right, so simmering, is it?
Yeah.
See, that's different to anxiety.
Yeah.
See, for me, if I was starting to get anxious, my heart rate might go up, but it might be that I start thinking fearful thoughts, whereas if I'm starting to get angry, I may simmer.
No,
Can you
simmer, more of a simmer.
Yeah, can you hear that? There is a
After I noticed
difference.
the heartbeat was,
Yeah?
there's a bit of fear coming in.
Sarah and I will raise our voice.
You raise your voice so you can feel it coming
Yeah.
on. What about for you?
I go as.
So we know when we start getting angry.
I start to get really cranky, so.
Yeah, so you can feel the cranky. Yeah? Can you see again?
Agitated, sort of.
Yeah? Okay. Someone's come up to you, they want something, they need something from you, it's not good for you to be able to do. You want to run. Yeah? But what about your anger? Where's your anger?
I probably have interested properly.
Okay, all right, good insight, yeah.
I'm welling up.
Yeah.
Starts about here.
Starts about here, it starts going, yeah. Yeah? Mhm.
Jenny never gets
She would though.
Yeah, she
It's, look, all our emotions are actually God-given. They're there to protect us, they're to help us to live well, to be well, to do well. If we're not accessing those, I'm not sure how we can do well and be well. Especially around conflict or when people are trying to get something from us that's not useful.
I can slam doors well.
That may be a bit down the track. Do you know when it's early?
Oh, just probably get red in the face.
Red in the face, yeah, okay.
Probably raising my voice.
Raising your voice, yeah, okay.
Go red in the face.
Red in the face, yeah.
I tend to hang up on people.
Yeah, hang up on them like that, yeah.
And then just, yeah, probably the simmering going on and
Simmering.
tell someone else about it.
Yeah, okay. See, that's a later sign. We need to start picking up earlier signs. Yeah.
Oh, I would start muttering under my breath.
Okay.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
and embrace swear words.
All right. Yeah.
Well, that's where she goes on.
Talk faster.
Yeah. Yeah. See, we need to pick up the early warning signs, the early signs. So talking faster may be it for you. Slam your phone down, do you start to get a bit far down the track?
I just go quiet.
You go quiet. Yeah. So that's an indication.
I feel my body stiffen.
Stephen, yeah, okay. Yeah.
Well, I have difficulty in identifying the early signs because I have the same symptoms of anger as I do anxiety.
Right.
Heart, sweating here, and usually when it gets to the worst part I can tell I'll say something that I wish I hadn't said.
Yeah. See, that's too far down the track.
Yeah, so I have difficulty identifying.
See, I can, for me, it's that jaw clench. I can tell straight away that someone's just started and I'm knowing.
Yeah, it's probably the tension, there's a whole tension.
Tension thing, yeah. Okay, yeah, so
Setting
it's
like-
getting ready. Yep.
As well as the other stuff.
Yeah. Karen?
I swear a lot in my head. And from what I can gather, it just becomes like black cloud
Carol
on my
gets
face.
laser on those.
Yeah. People will tell me I'm angry before, but it's usually what goes off in my head first.
But see, we need to pick up on the early signs first. So we can actually know what's going on so that we can manage the conflict kind of stuff better.
I feel the pressure in my head.
Yeah, okay.
And probably also my mouth gets kind of really firm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I get a bit tense and feel.
Tense, yeah.
Yeah. But my thoughts as well, I start getting a bit.
It's a bit like
Not,
Tourette's.
yeah, not swearing, but I start getting a bit,
Yeah.
a bit negative.
So again, it's worth thinking about in your pastoral care around conflict, people who are not doing well, under stress themselves, wanting to get something. And it may not be good for you to do that, to listen to that anger. Because again, if you don't, you're not going to be truthful. You'll say something or do something to put them off, or you'll give them the message to tick off, whatever it is. But again, we need to be aware of that. It's worth reading up on.
I know what Darth Vader did when he he let loose a few starships.
Yeah.
Starfighters.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the trouble though, within, you know, and within our Western culture we go straight to violence. It bothers me, you know, I go and see, you know, I think there are lots of good things in some of the movies that are coming out, but violence is the way to go.
Yeah.
And I'm not, you know, I struggle with some of those images sometimes of how that happens. Even on the sporting field, it's okay for me to be violent. Now, you know, I used to play hockey, which is quite an impressive sport. It's okay for you to be violent, but off the rink, you're best of mates.
And the model you see, okay, domestically, even on the sporting field, is the baiting and baiting until they get the reaction.
Yeah.
And then the victim.
Yeah, I used to do that well. But again, have a think about that kind of stuff around the conflict stuff, but again, you need to be aware of those kinds of things. We're going to finish there today because it's 5:02. I need you to do a quick kind of survey for me, feedback, if you're willing to do that.